Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:30, and this is our Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting. And we're going to move the agenda a little bit. We're going to be doing the interviews shortly, but first, calling the meeting to order. And could you take roll, please?
Commissioner Sullivan? Here. Commissioner Gitlin?
Here.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Chair Ania?
I'm here. Thank you. The first order I'm going to do is public comments before we do the interviews. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. And after receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment? Yes. Please state your name.
I'm a resident of the city. Today, you people face a challenge. That challenge is choosing somebody from the general public to sit as the public member. I'd like to give you some homegrown wisdom. In the past of the history of this board, the good old boy and the good old girl system played in choosing the public member. Sometimes the candidates that were chose did not have the best interest of the general public in their souls. So today, when these people come up to you and give you why they want to sit on this board, I think you have a general responsibility to the whole community to choose the best candidate to serve at that seat at the end. Because it's not who they are, but what they can bring to the table of this organization. Because there's some critical decisions in the next year or two that will have to be made. And at times when there's a tie, the public member decides which way, for the best of the public interest, to vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, well, close public comments. And by the way, we're all new board members here. And this is my first time serving. It's all of ours first time serving on the task on this board. You served, I guess, for a while. That's true. Let me go. We're going to take up item number 7.1 now, and this is going to be the interview process for our public member. And please listen carefully. We have 7 applicants for this position, and we're just going to take them in random order. One candidate is on the telephone because he's in Sacramento at a conference, so we'll take him on the phone. Each will be asked 3 general questions. Each will be asked 3 general questions, and they'll be the same questions. And in fairness to all candidates, we ask that that you wait in our conference room until we call you, because that way you won't hear the questions. And then applicants, after you're interviewed, you're free to stay out in the audience. And we will be scoring each candidate from 1 to 10, 10 being the most favorable. And the rankings will be compiled by the clerk and will be announced. And then the board will need to make a motion and second that motion to select their preferred choice. And after that, the decision is not made right here today. We'll choose a candidate, and then that has to go back to the city council for approval and has to go back to the board of supervisors for approval, which will be done the first part of May. And so that applicant will be seated at our next regular meeting here, which is at the end of May.
No, I'm here.
Okay. So, if there's no questions for the candidate, I would ask that you come up and go to our conference room here, and we'll call you in just random order. We're going to take the telephone one first. They're on the line right now, and so then we'll be calling you. Thank you. Yes, great. We do it here. Okay. And for the board, we're on, let me find it here, we're on number 7.1. So do we have Mr. Martell on the phone? Mr. Martell, are you there?
Ray, can you hear him?
Yeah, it's a little, hello?
Okay, hi, Mr. Martell. It's Chairman Ania. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for accommodating my request. I am out of town on business. So
Okay, I
I
appreciate.
appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, we have 3 questions, and the first question is, what motivated you to apply for this position?
I have a very good understanding and very solid, no pun intended, experience in solid waste management, recycling, diversion. I have served in public capacity before, and I just thought that I could offer my expertise in being able to help with some of the issues that are presently current with the solid waste in Del Norte County.
Okay. Question number 2, and you've answered some of this. What special skills or experiences would you bring to the authority board?
Well, currently I serve as the chairman for our own Bureau Tribe solid waste management task force, in which we deal with things like recycling, illegal dumping, enforcement, code enforcement. We deal with I actually I oversee the daily operations of the transfer station in Wichita. I have to deal with all the recycling and the diversions that actually occur up there throughout the entire tribe itself. Other experiences, I am hazmat certified, so I understand the importance of being able to divert hazardous materials. Getting a lot of the special wastes properly disposed of has always been a challenge. So I do fully understand what it takes to do those types of programs.
Okay, thank you. And our third question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns relating to solid waste, recycling, and composting in Del Norte County at this time?
Well, currently, since there is no composting, there's an opportunity there that is being unmet. Recycling, I personally have seen an increase in the amount of recycling. However, to get to a goal of where we need to be, I do believe that we are shy of that, and there's always room for improvement on that. And as far as solid waste, we need to make sure that we can offer solid waste at rates or have accessibility for all citizens of Del Norte County and the businesses to be able to affordably remove their solid waste in a safe and efficient manner. And that goes for recycling too, whether it be cardboard, glass cans, bottles, household hazardous waste, or any of the things that need to be diverted.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Those are the 3 questions, and we'll have somebody from the authority call you and let you know who we selected.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and again, I apologize for not being there in person, but I am actually down in Sacramento at Waste Management at their resource material facility, getting some more training.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll go on to our candidate. Let's see. Our first candidate is Ralph Dickey. Our second candidate, I should say. Ralph Dickey. Good afternoon, Mr. Dickey. We have 3 questions for you.
Sure.
The first question is, what motivated you to apply for this position?
I've been involved with the task force since July, and before that I was making most of the meetings too, that were public meetings. And it was just, I was not liking the direction that it was going before, and so I was like, hey, you know, I can't just sit there and complain, I got to be part of the solution. So I became on the task force, and got myself up to speed. And I believe I can do more on the board than I can do on the task force.
Okay. The second question is, what special skills or experiences would you bring to the authority board?
I currently am a real estate investor, and I own quite a few rentals in the town. And I take care of a few of my parents' rentals and a few others of my parents' businesses. But what I would provide is I get feedback from all these people all the time about the different things of trash and how to get rid of it, because I'm vestedly interested in my places not getting trashed and not looking like trash dumps. So I get a huge feedback from the public when things happen, from other people, and they usually tell me all of their complaints.
And the third question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns relating to solid waste, recycling, and composting in Del Norte at this time?
Well, the board, the Solid Waste Authority, their biggest thing is to keep everybody out of liability and to keep them legal for the state. Hopefully to provide the best service that we can for the minimal cost that we can. You want to get Cadillac service for Honda prices. You want to get rolling with the business. You want it to be cheaper than it is now. And having been part of the task force, I can see some areas that cost could be looked at to be lowered. Now, you have to look at it before you can say, oh yeah, that will work or not work, but it has to be looked at to know if it's going to be cheaper to do it one way or versus the other.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome to be out in the audience there now. Our next candidate is David Alvarez. Good afternoon, Mr. Alvarez.
Good afternoon.
We have 3 questions. The first one is, what motivated you to apply for this position?
What motivated me? Well, I'm vice chair of California United Home Care, and I started a committee for the Hispanics, but I'm starting to kind of scattered out and not really a group here, so I'm trying to get that together. But I figured, to play a part in recology and inform, the Hispanic people more and more. They're in Crescent City, so I think they need a voice.
Okay. What special skills or experiences would you bring to the authority board?
I recycle. I adopt a highway. I've been doing that for the last couple of years. Just a little knowledge of, I guess, materials. Just recycling, but not too much, because I haven't done a lot of these boards or anything, so it's just a learning for me.
And the last question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns related to solid waste or recycling or composting in Del Norte?
Can you?
Yeah, what do you see as the most pressing issues relating to solid waste and recycling?
Just the pricing. Finding something to do with it. Instead of just landfill. Just recycling and putting it to use, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much, and you're welcome to stay. Our next candidate is, you can stay out here. Mary Wilson's our next candidate. Good afternoon, Mrs. Wilson. Hi. We have 3 questions for you. The first one is, what motivated you to apply for the position?
Well, basically, of course, I'm a resident of Del Norte County and a mother, and I want a healthy and clean community. And also, as a business person, I understand that we have a need for balance, because it was about over 18 months ago I got got involved when my bill for my business at Ocean World shot up from $400 a month to $900 a month, and that really was the awakening for me to get involved in what was happening. And as the mayor at that time stated, he had never received so many complaints from constituents because of this one issue. And I realize, our economy here in Del Norte is very fragile, and many companies don't make it here, and it's important that we strive to keep a balance, and that we have people that hopefully are representative that can see both sides. So not only for our environment, but also for the business, and that's something that I bring to the table. I feel I could be a representative for the community for both of those things. I live in the county and I own a business in the city, and I just really believe it's important to encourage consumers by giving cost-saving opportunities as opposed to overbearing regulations. And I think our community benefits best if we can align ourselves with the consumers instead of being at odds with them. And I definitely believe a well-managed program could create the balance of a sanitary community, along with providing helpful services to the consumers at a reasonable cost.
Okay. The second question is, what special skills or experiences would you bring to the authority board?
It really, I have a sincere interest, and I've demonstrated that by my involvement as chair of the local task force over this last year. I feel that I've been very dedicated. I put in over 18 months of consistent work and attendance. I was able to, had good attendance. Many months I had weekly meetings, not just monthly meetings, but weekly meetings. I gained a lot of knowledge from my involvement, the law, the structure of the JPA, the inside workings of the solid waste management. I contacted outside agencies and counties during my tenure to compare their solid waste programs. I researched and coordinated comparisons between state, county, and city ordinances to determine how our solid waste management authority ordinances stacked up. I found that there was good and there was bad, and I was able to root out what was salvageable. We did put forward a report that I had written in regards to the ordinances that was submitted to the former super board. I did extensive review on the 5-year report that is mandated to be done by the task force before I uncovered that the report had already been done, but it had not been submitted by staff. So finding this was something that saved a tremendous amount of time. I have the experience as a business owner for over 20 years, and I have business skills. I have to maintain a budget, do cost assessment, quality, and cost control measures. And as a mom, I sincerely care about the environment and our future of our wonderful community in which I raise my children. And my education is, I have a bachelor degree from Cal State University, Sacramento, and I obtained my real estate broker's license, and I have taken classes in contract law as well.
Thank you. And the third question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns related to solid waste, recycling, and composting in our county now?
Well, for me, I think that the absolute most important thing that our county has to do is that we have got to maintain that contract with White City. We do not have a landfill now at this point in time, and we are able to, because of this contract, we are able to keep our rates low, and I feel it's, for the long term down the road, it is just vitally important that that resource be maintained for us and accessible, and that one thing more than anything else I believe will be able to keep the cost low so that we do not have increase in rates and thereby might have more illegal dumping, but by being able to maintain that, I think it is extremely important.
Thank you. And you're welcome to sit out in the audience. Our next candidate is Kevin Fallon. Good afternoon, Mr. Fallon.
Good afternoon.
We have three questions that we're asking.
Sure.
And the first one is, what motivated you to apply for this position?
I saw it as an opportunity to be a part of the community, become a bigger contributor to the community, and identify this as a place where we want to live in the long run. And I have time now to make those efforts. So that's what drove me to this.
Okay. Number two is, what special skills or experiences would you bring to the authority board?
I have quite a substantial business history in, I had a fairly large trucking company that I ran for about 20 years. And I feel I'm pretty good at identifying situations, finding good solutions, looking at the big picture and making sense out of it.
Okay. And our third question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns related to solid waste, recycling, and composting in our county at this time?
I feel that I'm an ardent supporter of recycling, and I'd like to see that come to a forefront in the community and be dealt with on a pretty high level to incentivize people to do what it takes to take recycling to that level and make good use out of it.
Good. Thank you. You're welcome to sit down in the audience. We have a couple of more people. Warren Reinwald? Raywald, I'm sorry. Raywald. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We have three questions for you.
Okay.
First one is, what motivated you to apply for this position?
I heard there was a vacancy on the board. I've been a resident for about 20 years. It's just one of those things that I thought I could probably fit in pretty well. Got some background in public health, so I know a little bit about some of the environmental issues that the county has as a history, as a historical fact. So I just thought I'd throw my name in the hat.
Okay. Number two is, what special skills or experiences would you bring to our authority board?
Well, I'm a physician, so I have a science background in general. I was a biology major in college. Been public health officer. I was public health officer for about 5 years. So as part of that, I was briefed on some of the issues that the county has faced in the past. I think that gives me a good background. That's about it.
And the last question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns related to solid waste, recycling, and composting in our county at this time?
Well, I think the main issues are just the future direction. And what I've been reading and hearing in the news, it sounds pretty complicated at the moment. And getting that sorted out is going to be a big task.
Okay, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay out in the audience.
Thank you.
And our final one is Sally Ward. Good afternoon, Ms. Roy.
Good afternoon.
I have 3 questions for you. The first question is, what motivated you to apply for this position?
I was looking for a way to give back to my community, and I was thinking that this is a very important board in terms of the health and the beauty of our county. So
Okay.
I thought as an impartial person, I could be on the board and help make some of those difficult decisions.
Okay. The second question is, what special skills or experiences would you bring to the authority board?
I've served on a number of committees as well as given input. I worked really well with decision-making based on facts and information. So when I look towards what kind of decisions need to be made on this board, it's like we need to gather adequate information before we can decide on anything. So I'd be looking for enough information to make good decisions. Right now, we're doing a lot of evidence-based work at where I work at the school district. And the other part is my counseling background, that I'm used to listening to people, to gathering information, looking at different viewpoints, and then trying to work toward a compromise, if that's the correct decision.
And the final question is, what do you see as the most pressing issues or concerns related to solid waste, recycling, and composting in our county at this time?
I think the very existence of the Joint Powers Authority is one of the biggest issues I'm seeing right now, that there's a lot of question whether or not it's effective and if it's still necessary. That seems to be the overriding issue at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
See you out in the audience. And we'll just take a minute or two here to finish our paperwork. If you're done with them, fold it and I'll give it to Mr. Ward. Sure, you can keep your own notes. Yeah, that's fine. And while he's doing that, we'll go on with the meeting. We're on we're going to go to item number 1, and that's a report from the Solid Waste Task Force. Mr. Hunt? Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is the consent agenda, And on there is the approval of minutes from the regular session of Tuesday, March 26th, and approval of invoice from EBA Engineering in the amount of $8,195.75. Is there a motion for approval?
What was that? I'm sorry,
That was 2.1, consent agenda.
Okay.
Those are the only two items on the consent. Approval of minutes and an invoice for $8,195. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second that.
Moved in second. Would you take the roll, please, Mr. Ward? Or pull the vote, rather.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes. We'll go on to item number 3, and that's the director's report. And there's 4 items for information only. So, Mr. Henrik, did you want to talk about
I realized after the last meeting that with some new board members, it would be worth just highlighting what you get when you get these reports, so that you can make sense out of where our budget's at. Understanding that our budget is separate from the city and the county, and that our budget by itself needs to balance. There was a situation several years ago when we did have a deficit budget. Changes were made to cut expenses and to increase revenue, so that at the end of last fiscal year, we did have a budget surplus at the end of fiscal 11-12. We had a $70,000 net surplus, and so we paid for our bills, and we're starting to build up our cash reserve. The reason we need to have it's prudent to have a cash reserve is we have a landfill that we need to maintain. There's unknowns that may pop up with the landfill, and basically we have now an obligation to start putting aside money for depreciation. So if there's a need for repairs or replacement on buildings or equipment, we have started to build up some cash to be able to do that. The end of fiscal 11-12, we have an external auditor that comes in, and Smith & Newell is our auditor. They are still in the process of compiling that audit. Last month and a little bit the month before, I talked about what you will see in the audit when we get the audit for fiscal 11-12 is probably going to be described as an unreconciled cash deficit, something which we believe has been related to the procedures for buying back NSF checks, non-sufficient funds checks, bounce checks, where we have a process with the county where we buy checks back with cash. We've been working with the county auditor and Rich Taylor to come up with adequate documentation to reconcile that issue, and most recently I was directed, or it was recommended by the county auditor and directed by the board to find an outside consultant to come in and take a look at that issue to try to resolve it. I'll be able to report we are in the process of hiring CPA Don Scanlon to work on that issue for us, and I'll have more to report as he starts his contract. For this current fiscal year, I want to refer you to item 3.1. Every month we get a report from the county. 3.1 is what we refer to as the Treasurer Controller Report. This gives you a ballpark idea, or actually a precise idea of where we're at on a cash basis. This is based on what the county records show as far as money that has been deposited or expenses that have been expended. If you look at the top line on that, under assets, see a cash solid waste, $562,396. That is one thing you can look at every month to see if our cash balance is going up or going down. If we go back 2.5 years, you'll see that a couple years ago, that cash balance was more in the range of $300,000. So we are building up our cash reserve for the unknown or unexpected events that may come up. Under liabilities and fund equity, there's a line described as post-closure liability. That is the estimated cost of maintaining the landfill for the remainder of the 30-year period. Excuse me for the members that know this, but I know Mr. Gitlin is fairly new, so I may be saying things that some of you have heard before. We applied to Cal Recycle, which is the state agency responsible for landfills and all solid waste and recycling, to have that number, 2.65 million, reduced proportionate to the 5 years that have been completed. So when you see the audit for the last fiscal year, and as soon as that audit recognizes that we have reduced it, that liability has been reduced now more in the range of $2.2 million. So telling you all this to understand, or at least to give you context of the relative financial strength of the agency. We not only are paying all of our bills, and the revenue is coming in, as I'll cover in the next item, that our financial health is relatively strong. As you may already know, the Solid Waste Authority is self-funded. We don't get any tax money from the city or the county or the state or the federal government. All of our bills are paid from the revenue that we generate either at the transfer station or from franchise fees. So we fund ourselves, and it doesn't cost the city or the county anything. If you'll page forward to 3.4, this is a report that I started providing for you last year. So we're tracking, in this case, this is more of an accrual basis reporting. This is the revenue that we have earned during each of the respective months that I'm reporting, which is different from the cash basis that the county's reporting. Comparing the two can be a little confusing. That's why I'm pointing out the difference. If you look at the authority revenue report through March 2013, on the right-hand column, you're going to see the amount of actual revenue earned during the month. On the far right-hand column is the amount over or under for that month. On the bottom right-hand side is the current amount that's above and beyond the amount that was budgeted for this year. So you can see our revenue on this line for our transfer station revenue is coming in above projections, which means, at least for the moment, we're continuing to stay ahead of the budget, and that's projected to be a little more than $40,000 by the end of the year. The next page is the franchise fee reporting. Not as good a news there, in the sense that we budgeted $257,000 and we're projected at the end of the year to have closer to $242,000. So there's a projected deficit in that revenue line, about $16,000, which is more than made up by the difference in the tipping fees, but it is notable. The primary reason for that is that in the previous year we had higher franchise fees when the city elected to pull the sewage treatment plant and the sludge hauling out of our franchise. That became a separate contract, and we're losing about, or we're not getting about $2,000 a month in revenue that we were getting from franchise fees on the sludge hauling. So that's the primary explanation for that deficit. When I prepare the budget for next fiscal year, we will project closer to the number that we'll use the actual number that we have for this year to project for next year. And similarly for the transfer station revenue, where we're projecting to be over for this year, we'll be able to bump that up a little bit to try to make our budget whole. Those, I think, are the two items you're going to get every month, and I wanted to take a minute just to explain what that tells you when you look at those. You can see where our revenue is, where our costs are. If you look at, once again, to the item 3.1, the Treasurer Controller Report, bottom line, year-to-date through March, through 9 months, the year-to-date actual is about $86,000 net over budget. That is, the revenue is exceeding the expenses by that much. So from these bits of information that you get, one from the county and one from your staff, it'll give you, every month, it will give you an idea of where we're at financially. Bottom line is our budget is pretty strong, and although next year's budget will be more of a challenge because many expenses have gone up, that's a subject for a later discussion or more in detail for next month.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, directors have any questions? Yes, go ahead. No?
I have just a very minor one, very minor. On 3.2, it's not a question, just a comment. Richard Taylor, with just a typo, we want to make sure that people don't think we have a different treasurer. It says Tyler, not Taylor. I know, he feels strongly about that kind of thing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm pretty sure we spell it correctly on his check.
Okay.
Mr. Sullivan?
He would tell us if we made a mistake on that.
Well, I've got a couple of issues with the self-funded deal. I think it's misinformation put out that we're completely self-funded because we are funded through a monopoly mechanism in town. You, as the consumers in this community, have no other choice but to use our transfer site. There is no option. So to say we're self-funded makes it sound like we go out and earn the money and it all generates from nothing. It's actual, almost the equivalent of a tax on the consumers. So it really is I don't think that's an accurate description to call us a self-funded thing. Granted, it's not tax money, but it might as well be because you have to pay it. There is no other option to go anywhere else. So the other thing is we kind of glazed over the auditor hiring thing, but we did hire a forensic auditor, and I think the public needs to know why we hired a forensic auditor, besides the fact that we've got a discrepancy in our bookkeeping. I think that I'm not comfortable with just not relaying that to the public as exactly why we're hiring a forensic auditor. So obviously there is a difference in terms of what we're showing money that's not there, and I think the public deserves to know what that amount is.
The reason we hired the independent CPA is to complete that study and prepare that assessment so that you can have an accurate number. And
Well, if it's $100, then we wouldn't be hiring a forensic auditor.
well, I can tell you that before Christmas, first of all, this issue came up last fall. Then we didn't have board meetings for 4 months, so as soon as I could report this in February, when we had the February meeting, I reported it. We discussed it at the last meeting. We have gone back to 2005 and documented more than $23,000 in bounce checks that we had to buy back. The process that the county has is that if a check is returned to the county, we need to buy it back from the county with cash. And the only place that the cash comes from is our safe. So the accumulated, what we believe happened is the accumulated deficit caused from buying those checks back is what caused the situation that we're trying to document. So the CPA that we're hiring to do that is to look at the documentation we have available and to come up with a conclusion as to what that all means for us.
Okay. And also, we not only had to buy back the checks, we have a $25 fine from the county for each check that bounces. Every bounce check, the county charges us $25.
Right,
correct?
and to be clear, the bank charges the county charges us,
Right.
we charge the customers, and we make every effort to try to recover that money. That is not necessarily the salient issue that we're trying to address. It's looking at how those check buybacks happened in the past. Did that have an influence on the unreconciled cash deficit that we're looking at? And more importantly, Mike, as you asked last time we met, is the situation has been rectified from this point forward. One thing that might have helped identify this sooner is something that has happened twice since this issue arose, which is a surprise cash count. So the external auditor, when he was here, went into our safe. This was after we had resolved this issue with the county, and then what was it, a couple weeks ago, Rich and the county staff came in to do the same thing. They opened up the safe, they looked at everything, they counted. Both times cash counts were accurate. So there was a past issue, we want to resolve it, we want to have all the facts before we speculate on why that was. We believe it was and is related to the NSF check issue, but the county auditor, as much as they tried to help us try to find some corroborating documentation on that, doesn't have the time to do it. So it was just the conclusion of this board and the auditor that, the county auditor, that we should bring in an outsider that has the time to take a look at it and see if this can be reconciled.
Mr. Hendrick, do we have a time frame for that auditor's report? Do you have any idea?
Well, first time frame was wait for tax season after April 15th. It's hard to get any CPA's attention. I have drafted a scope of work for a contract. I ran it past Rich and Clint Shad, the county auditor, to make sure that that was what everybody wanted. I expect this week we'll have a contract, and as soon as we get him started, we'll get him going through the documents that we have, and my hope is that it will make sense to him. He'll have time to reconcile it for us, and I'll report that back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you.
We're starting with a $5,000 contract, and I hope that's enough.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the board? Is there any public comment on the director's report? Okay, if not, have you finished that tabulation, Mr. Ward?
Yes, I have the file scores.
Okay. Is there one person to?
Ted, can you just read the names in the ranking order without the scores so people have some idea?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Good.
So the top scores in order went to, we have a tie for first place between Martell and Wilson, and then in order followed by Fallon, Raywald, Roy, Dickey, and Alvarez. So that's just the scores. It's not binding. That's your information.
All right, let me look at the... Oh, we did.
What are the odds of that, huh?
Yeah, it's a tie.
My goodness.
Do you have a recommendation to,
Farania, I just want to make sure that we have public comment on this item,
on this, on
on
the
the selection.
applicants?
Yes.
Yes. Is there any public comment on the public member procedures? Okay, I see none. The next, what is the, no, I'm sorry. Oh, could you read the order back one more time?
The tallied scores, they were rated from 1 to 10, and I just did the total.
Yeah, we don't need the scores, just
Right.
the rating.
So the top scores were a tie between Ray Martell and Mary Wilson, and then in order, the rest of the candidates followed: Fallon, Raywald, Roy, Dickey, and Alvarez.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hendricks, any suggestions on the tie, or just a motion?
This exercise of ranking them is just that. It's an exercise. You could take the last one, you could take the first one. It, at this point, requires a motion and a second for somebody. And under the rules of order that are followed by this group, there can be a second motion and a second for a second person. There could be a third, and the protocol is the last motion gets voted on first, and then it moves up to the first motion. So that's the process.
Kevin, one more time, explain that that protocol. Your voice was tapering off there.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We have a tie,
I'll
so
get
what's
on
the
mic.
protocol?
The process that you've gone through so far is just to inform you. You can make a motion for anybody you think is the right person. You can make a motion, and if you get a second, then that's the first motion. If there is a second choice, that is a second motion and a second, then you've got two choices. The process for voting is that you vote on the second motion before the first motion.
Last one nominated gets voted on first, all the way back.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if it makes, I'm not sure if it has to make sense, but those are the rules that I've been told.
All right, so then we will go back.
It's a little confusing to do it that way, but those are the rules.
We'll go back to then 7.1, and action regarding appointment of public member to the board. Is there a motion to approve a member?
First, let me say how fortunate we are to have all these candidates. I mean, this is, especially for what may prove to be a very difficult job. So I appreciate anyone that steps forward. As I listened to the interviews and I looked at the paperwork that was there, after doing all that, I would make a motion that we approve Ray Martell to be the public member.
Is there a second to that motion?
Actually, does it require a second on nominations? I don't think it requires
It
a
doesn't.
second. Martha? I think it, at
Just
least at the
requires a
board,
vote.
when we nominate chair and stuff, we just nominate, that's it, one nomination.
Sorry,
It
this
does
would be an
require a second.
official motion and action by the board, so we need a first and a second. And then
Yes, there is a second. It does
Okay.
we need a second.
So it's been moved and seconded? Oh, you said yes, you did.
I asked a question.
Oh, okay.
Rice, Ms. Rice, if you needed a second, she said, yes, you do.
Okay, sorry. Okay, it's been moved for Mr. Martell. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the nomination.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Ward, would you please take the,
Wait, we still have nominations.
oh, is there any other nominations? I'm sorry. Is there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mary Wilson as the member at large.
And I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded and for Mary Wilson, so we will take that vote first. So, Mr. Ward, would you call the roll for that?
This is,
I just want to make sure we're voting on the right candidate. So we're taking the vote for Mary Wilson right now, not for Mr. Martell.
that's correct. This
Okay.
first vote is to approve Mary Wilson to be the public member on the Board of Commissioners of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. Commissioner Holly,
No.
Commissioner Gitlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Yes.
Commissioner Ania.
Yes. So, Mary Wilson, congratulations. Now,
Congratulations.
it goes back to the city council for a vote, and it goes back to the board of supervisors. So, hopefully that'll be on their agendas for May, and then our next meeting, we should have that completed. Once again, thank you to all the candidates that applied, and
Thank you.
We'll move on. We'll, thank you. We'll move on to item number 4. These are discussion items. 4.1 is the discussion and possible action regarding the landfill insurance. Kevin?
I'm sorry, just take a Okay, Chair Ania said that one of the board members asked to have this put on the agenda, and I'm not sure who or what your interest was, so I'm not sure what
I think I asked this one.
Go ahead. You want to know if we do have landfill insurance or not?
No, we don't.
We don't.
No, we don't.
Are we thinking about getting it?
Although,
Go ahead.
I think one of the things came up, we had a presentation by Trindell at our board meeting, and landfill was listed as one of the items insured. So I would check with Trindell to see if,
Maybe the
from
county
the small
has it?
columns that were up there, it said landfill under county's insurance.
Your insurance. Well, that would be the right place to have it.
So I would check with David Nelson with Trindell and see if to verify that landfill has any kind of insurance behind it right now.
Okay.
So I don't know that for a fact. It didn't come up in the conversation, but it was listed on his PowerPoint presentation, so,
For the county.
for the county on the landfill.
And who's the contact on that?
Trindell?
Is that a
I mean,
company?
is there?
Yeah, it's an insurance company. It was a joint powers between Trinity County, Del Norte County. I want to say, do you remember how many? Was it 14?
There's actually
counties?
10 counties,
10 counties,
yeah.
Commissioner.
Trinity
So
and Del, I just learned that yesterday at a training. It's Trinity and Del Norte got together and
They were
called
the
it
first.
Trindell.
Yeah.
Do you have a name though? A contact?
David Nelson.
David Nelson. There you go.
He's the executive director.
I will follow up with David
And I have
Nelson.
a phone number contact if you need it, Kevin.
Great. Thank you, Roger.
Okay.
Sure, let me check on that. That would be fabulous if you already have it. It's the county's landfill, the county owns it, it makes sense for the county to have it. I mean, more than it makes sense for this group.
Although it is something that
To
if
have
we
it.
don't, we need to have some kind of plan as to when we're gonna put something in place, because that is, or what, at least know what the costs are to put it in place.
If we don't.
If we don't, so.
If we, how about if I report back at the next meeting and you give me further direction to
perfect.
do what you want to do?
Thank you. Thank you.
I can
Any
do
public
that.
comment on that? Board members?
Thank you, that was a
Okay.
good tip.
We'll move to item number 5. This is the collections franchise. Discussion and possible action regarding approval of change order number 3 to contract with Recology Del Norte, authorizing the annual CPI adjustment of the collection rates as provided for in the collection franchise.
So this happens every year, essentially under our agreements with both the transfer station operations agreement and the collections franchise. They have a percentage of the consumer price index increase that's in the contract that is given as an annual rate increase. So that's why this can be done through a rate resolution as opposed to an ordinance, in that when Rate Ordinance 1101 was adopted, it adopted all the provisions of those agreements. And so change order 3 essentially would modify the collection rates adjusted by CPI, and this has been reviewed by Recology as well, so. we're
And that's the
agreeing on
same, 6.2 is Hambro's request for
it.
it.
Exactly, and it's based on the same consumer price
It's
index, but.
built into the contract.
That's
Exactly.
correct.
So I'll move to approve item 5.1 and item 6.2, listed as change order 3 with Recology and change order 16 with Hambro's Waste Solutions Group.
Is there,
I'll second.
it's been moved and set.
Just clarification, Commissioner Gitlin, you're seconding both those motions?
I took it as
Was that one, was that one motion?
One motion to
and two
approve both
actions.
items. So it's one motion, but 2 items.
2 items.
Yeah, let
So
me-
if that's a one motion for 2 items, my second is a second for 2 items.
Okay.
That works.
Pardon?
That
Okay.
works.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Can I just observe, just to point out that Ted has been trying, I mean, Ted has been our clerk for a while. It does become hard, you notice, when he's doing 2 things at once. This is off agenda, but I'm just going to let you know. We've got the potential of contracting with Karen Phillips to come and be our clerk, and I think I'll bring that to the next meeting for your consideration, because this just is hard. I just wanted to note, this is
Okay.
challenging for Ted when he's trying to take minutes, take notes, take votes, and
All right.
compile scores and all this
Is
stuff.
there anything we can do to facilitate this? Do we need to slow down?
No, I
Or-
think,
No, I'm saying this
Yeah,
not in any kind of a manner, because I realize that these are weighty matters, and we're moving through them. Even I asked the question, I want to make sure who I'm voting for and in what order, because that got a little confusing. First nominated, last voted on. So I can understand absolutely where you're coming from, Ted. So I'm all right with slowing things down if you're needing some extra time.
If I get into a panic, I'll go like this.
Okay.
So could you pull the vote on this item?
Commissioner Hawley?
yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes. We'll move on to item number 6, and that's the transfer station. The first one, 6.1, is the discussion on possible action regarding the potential to provide certified weight services at the transfer station to assist local residents and businesses to comply with the requirements of the California Department of Motor Vehicles.
There was a clear consensus at the last meeting that we should start moving down this path, so Ted has a brief overview for you of the steps we need to take and a recommendation for you.
So the bottom line is that the research that we were able to compile is all summarized in the staff report, but we could cover all of our costs. I'll get to the bottom line because I know that's what you're all interested in. And we could cover all of our costs and provide this service, providing certified weights with the certificate at the Del Norte County Transfer Station for $33 per customer, and a check weight service for $12 per customer. And that would cover all of our expenses, and we could put that into a draft rate ordinance. And so staff recommendation is to draft a rate ordinance for providing certified public scale services at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, and to introduce this rate ordinance for review by the authority board at the next regular authority meeting. So the prices that I just laid out there, by making that motion today, you wouldn't be adopting those rates. You would simply be saying, draft the rate ordinance, and then we'll consider it at the next meeting.
Mr. Gidlin?
And again, Ted or Kevin, whoever was addressing this the last meeting, walk me through this then. We have a viable working scale at Hambro, correct? Now, well, I see Mr. White is here. Maybe he can address that there is a working scale. Let me just make my point. The purpose of our doing this was a backup unit. Should something happen to their scale, we're not forcing people to drive down to Eureka because DMV said you need a scale, and the Hambro scale is, for whatever reason, not available. Now, I understand, and I want to please refresh my memory, the scale is there, it needs to be certified, but only in one area. Is that what we spoke about?
Not exactly. We have two scales that are annually certified. Weights and Measures comes out, and we coordinate with county Weights and Measures to make sure that those scales are accurate for charging for services. That's somewhat different than the requirements that DMV has for a certified public scale, which they use for certifying road weights, particularly for commercial trucks. But to some extent, then the check weights are also of interest to folks who need public scale services. For instance, for truckers to want to make sure that they're on legal weight. So sometimes people will just come in and look for a check weight. But because that'll slow down traffic, there's that consideration. The other thing that needs to happen is we need to have a certified weighmaster. That would probably be me. And then I'd be training all of the other gate staff to be deputy weightmasters. And then everybody who comes in for a certified weight would get a weight certificate signed indicating exactly how much that vehicle weighed, and then they could take that certificate and go back to DMV to complete the paperwork they need to for their process.
And at the transfer station, the only item we were missing was the weighmaster component. That's my understanding from last meeting.
The weighmaster component, the training, the forms, the filing, we need to make sure that we're following every aspect of the law.
You were going to give us a report on the actual cost to get the weighmaster certified, et cetera, and the training, et cetera, and that's here in our sheet.
That's all in the text and addressed ultimately by those rates that I talked about.
But the other thing that's necessary is the rate ordinance, and to be clear, because I think we did understand the direction that y'all wanted was to get ourselves positioned to be able to provide this service if it was necessary, because the rate ordinance takes the longest. Setting a rate requires introducing the ordinance at the next meeting, and then prior to final adoption, introducing it also to the City Council and the Board of Supervisors to make sure that, because under the new rules, we have this approval, extra approval process. So it's the first time we've tried to do a rate ordinance under the new rules, and it's hard to say how long that's going to take, but it probably will take at least a few weeks, if not an extra month, to get it all done. What I'm going to suggest is that we get the rate in place and wait for you to give us the green light to prepare for providing that service. Either we find out that Hambro is a month or two away from stopping that service, but to try to get the rate in place first, not spend the money to get on the certification until you tell us to go. Then there's a 4 to 6 week period to get that process approved, and then we would be positioned to be able to provide the service. So it's kind of a multi-step process. We're suggesting is get the rate ordinance adopted so you have the rate approved and it's been through the process, and then when you say go, then we'll be closer to be able to provide that service within a couple months of you telling us to go.
So, Chair Ania, what is the action required today after we discuss? Is there an action?
After we discuss this, we would vote to whether we want to proceed with it, because this is an informational item. And I just had one question for Ted. If this becomes a reality in the future, you'd have to go to a training to be the weighmaster, or you already are one?
I would need to be a certified weighmaster. I don't know how formal the trainings are. I looked through the requirements. I feel confident I'd be able to train all of our folks.
there any other discussion on this item?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. Ted, in your analysis in number 1 and on the second page, it speaks to the fact that refuse site attendants might be reclassified as waymasters with an increase in pay. I'm a little surprised at that, given that the estimate is maybe about 35 people will cross the scales for this kind of activity a month. And right now last month there was 4,565 people going through. So in my computations, it would be less than a 1% change in their work. So, you know, I question whether or not that would be substantial enough for reclassification. And I don't know if those reclassifications are something that the JPA has any control over.
May I?
Yes, if you would, please.
Yes. It is not just this circumstance that is driving this. Let me answer your last question first. If we were proposing a reclassification, there's a very in-depth process we go through County Personnel Department. We would have to propose a change and update in the description of what they're doing. The County Personnel Department would look at comparative jobs in the county to make sure that the pay is equivalent or similar to similar county positions, and that recommendation would have to come back before we could bring that forward. It's really more historic than this one thing. This is what I consider to be an opportunity to take our lowest paid people, the people that work every day to keep the doors open for us, to try to get them a slightly larger amount of pay. The 5% bump for all of our gate staff would cost less than $5,000 a year. So we're not talking about a large amount of money. I think sometimes the effort to show appreciation for staff can go much further than the amount of money that might be awarded. But you need to understand the history of this. When this position was first created 20 years ago, we didn't have scales. They would go with a tape measure and measure the loads, and we didn't have computers, and it was a much, much simpler process. The job description has not been updated in all of this time, and it is a lot more complicated than it was then. And so this is in part to recognize that that job in and of itself, without certified weights, has become more complicated. It requires a higher level of skill, a higher level of training, and if we can generate an additional $5,000 that will help to compensate our staff in this way, there's all of those things combined that would suggest, or at least allow me to argue that that would be a good and fair thing to do.
Well, thank you. One of the reasons I brought it up is later on we have an item where you provided the contract between SEIU and the employees, and it talks about the rates are justified. A reclassification is when it's justified by the degree of change. And I was suggesting that this would not be enough of a degree of change in and of itself to probably justify something, but it's good to have.
And I would suggest that we're talking about a cumulative change over a longer period of time that I think would, but again, even if you allow me to pursue this, and I'm not even suggesting it now because we're still months away from providing the service, then that would require a fairly intensive effort interacting with the County Personnel Department, because they're very sensitive, as we are, to make sure that people in equivalent skill sets, equivalent positions. You might understand there are no county refuse site attendants to compare apples to apples, but there are similar positions and similar pay scales that I think they would be able to help us to look at.
Sure.
And I think updating the job description to be something more accurate and compared to what they're actually doing is a good step.
Certainly it needs to reflect the difference between the old landfill and today's transfer station. There's no question about it.
But that's a good observation. Thank you for pointing that out.
The only other thing is number 3 in your analysis. It talks about using a projected annual scale certification cost of $4,142, and that assumes that there might be events that we would require maintenance for. It's the same scales that we use for all of our other practices, right?
Yes.
Is the amount that's included in here just the portion that would be attributable to the new activity? or is that the whole amount of that
For
kind of a
scale
repair?
maintenance?
I guess my point is, if 4,500 people are going through a month over the scales, and the cost of a repair of the scales was attributable just to those going over the scales, you know, for their DMV certificate, it seems like it should be proportioned out somehow. Do you know what I mean? Because we're gonna have to fix the scale anyway. That's all I'm thinking.
Occasionally, we will have to fix the scale, and the last time we did have to fix it, we were struggling to find the money to be able to do it. So, it's, again...
Oh, I see. Okay.
it's, we started pursuing this at the request or suggestion of Chair Ania,
Mhm.
that this, being able to provide this service might provide a source of revenue that would make it worthwhile, and I took that to heart to try to cover expenses that we currently
Thank you.
don't have a source of money to cover. And probably most importantly is, well, we're putting people on the road with a weight, so there may be a need for there may be a need for a larger precision. Right now, our weights in and our weights out are relative, they're comparative. The scales, it's the difference in the weight that people get charged on right now is the basis for all of our business. But if we're providing certified weights, it's the actual factual accurate weight of that scale becomes a higher priority.
Mr. Chair,
That may
I
be
would
hard to
treat this-
quantify.
Sorry, as an informational item, that's what was requested at the last meeting. As long as Hamrose continues to do it, I would, I mean, at least we know the facts now. The only other question I had for Ted on this is what is the turnaround time to get the person with the necessary licenses?
It's not so much the certification, if I may answer that. The thing that will take the longest
Is the rate.
is the rate.
Yeah, I got that. But how long would it take?
6
to get,
weeks.
6 weeks? No, for the person to get certified.
Yeah, the whole certification process for TAD, for the training, for the permit
Be 6
approval
weeks.
is about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And I agree with you, Mr. Sullivan, on, this was only as a backup in case Ambrose wasn't going to do it anymore. But what Mr. Ledrich was asking is it takes, to get the ordinance into place but not use it, it's going to take 3 months?
Maybe 4.
4 months. And so he wanted to know if we wanted to pursue the ordinance and just have it there and not do
unless-
anything more.
I'd not, as long as we get a private manufacturer to do it, I'm inclined to stay with that unless we get a heads up that that's not going to happen, then I'd prefer to have some notice on it that, you know, if you guys aren't able to do this anymore, then I'd prefer to have the notice so we can actually get somebody trained in 6 weeks.
No, but the ordinance has to be in place first. He
But
said
I
it-
think
Can't provide the service unless you have a rate to charge.
Right.
And you can adopt a rate ordinance and not provide the service. You can put that in your back pocket until you decide that you want to provide the service.
That's what he's
but-
asking, if we want to do the ordinance with the rates and just hold it there and not do the training.
Yeah, I still would be inclined to leave it alone. It's
Chair Neal?
informational only at this point.
Let's not forget what we were talking about. I think we're kind of losing focus of the issue. We wanted, and I'm going to use your words, Commissioner Hawley, we wanted some kind of an insurance policy. And I think I heard that clearly, that should the services not be available to us at Hambro to weigh our vehicles so that we don't inconvenience our citizens and having to have them drive down to Eureka, which is a long haul and a treacherous one at that, with last chance grade going back and forth, I felt it was prudent to certify our scales as per our discussion. Now, if it's going to take an ordinance to do that, to end the process, we're not rushing anywhere. I think it's prudent to have a backup system, just like having a back set of batteries. The batteries work fine, but you just never know in this world we live in. So I'm in support of having, if this is what it's going to take, an ordinance which will be in abeyance, and that's what I'm hearing, then let's move forward on it. That's what the motion I would make at this time, to move forward on this with the idea that we may not need it. But at least at some point, we're covered if we do. I think that's prudent.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and, it's been moved and seconded. Any public discussion on this motion? Yeah. All right.
And I just want to clarify, my understanding is we will not take the steps to provide the service until you give us that direction. This just gets it in place as Supervisor Gitlin suggested.
That's exactly what I said. It's not going to be implemented, but the costs seem negligible from what I'm seeing from Ted's report, I think it's prudent to have a backup, and it's not expensive, so someone needs to tell me why not.
So, Mr. Ward, would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania,
Yes.
excuse me, Chair Ania.
Chair, yes. And since this is an ordinance, it has to go to the city council and has to go to the board of supervisors for approval.
Well, it has to be.
After approved
it's
by
written.
this
Yeah,
board.
we haven't,
Right.
we get
So
it right
the-
for the
The
next
next
one.
step is the rate ordinance would come back on the next
Right.
agenda of this board.
Okay. So we'll move on now to, we discussed 6.2 already. So we're on 6.3, which is a discussion and possible action regarding a request for a status report from Hambros WSG.
I asked Wes White to come and answer your questions.
Sure. Welcome, Mr. White.
Beautiful Crescent City afternoon, unusual,
Yes.
but I love it. Just to catch mostly Commissioner Hawley up to date, Hambro has been a fixture in this community for around 50 years now. And we have certainly been involved in solid waste issues. We've extended when the landfill was still running here, we extended the life significantly by taking green waste and starting a composting program, and we also extended the life by taking fish carcasses and turning that into successful businesses. With respect to progress report and update, the Hambro Group, let me give you just one quick overview too. The Hambro Group is comprised of 7 different separate and distinct companies, okay? So how one company operates it's a legal entity, is separate from the other entities as well. Sure, we're sisters and we're brothers, but sometimes sisterly and brotherly love doesn't go that far when you're talking intercompany stuff. Yes. So where we're at is we proceed to move down the same path that we had in my report that I was given to the 10-member commission, which was the 3 particle board plant companies are in the process of being dissolved. They're non-operational, and we continue down the liquidation path for those 3 companies. We have, since the 1st of January, ceased all operations with respect to Snoozy Shavings, with the exception of some minor maintenance we're doing there. So there's 4 companies. Resource Recovery Solutions, which was a recycling company mostly involved in metal recycling, a little bit of cardboard, has ceased operations, and that was due to it was really a break-even company at best. So there's 4, I'm trying to think of the other. Eco Nutrients is fully operational. As I said in my last report, we expect it to be sold. We still expect that to happen. Hopefully that will be to a local entrepreneur, and we expect that to transpire. With respect to Hambro WSG, we have successfully transitioned the transport of the garbage from Snoozy Shavings, which we sourced the transport for them, to an in-house haul now. Hambro WSG purchased all of the equipment that was needed to do that. We have all the permits in place. I think there's been some question about performance bond being in place. We do not have a performance bond in place. We do, however, are within the terms of the contract in that we have a CD in the Solid Waste Authority's name, sitting in the bank. All insurance is in place. From a financial aspect, Hambro WSG is performing as it has and has not lost money in I don't know how long, several months, years probably. So everything seems to be going according to plan. We're working very well with our secured creditors, and we're moving along with the plan. So happy to answer any questions should you have any.
Are there any questions from the board?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. We'll move on to item number 7.2, and that's the discussion of possible action regarding the status of the budget for 2012, 2013, and the process for the upcoming year. Mr. Mr. Hendricks?
I think in the past, I've been able to move the budget sooner. We got off to a slow start this year, and what I most appreciate in the last couple of years is there are several large expenses that are payables to the county. All of our payroll goes through the county. The benefits, insurance, and related expenses are paid to the county for the services that they provide. And although I received some of those cost projections, and the thing that I appreciate is the county auditor has been very helpful in providing those cost estimates so we can insert those into our budget. When I got the personnel projections for this coming year from Clinton Shad, he had worked out an estimate of what our personal expenses would be, and I noticed that he had an extra line in there for a position that we don't have. The way that the county calculates charges and costs for us is based on allocated employees, whether that position is filled or not, later on in the agenda. And I asked him if that would require a board vote. He thought it would be important for me to bring that to you so I could explain why that is. It's somewhat related to the action that we took several years ago when we were having a deficit budget, and we laid off one of our full-time office employees to reduce our staffing, to try to get a permanent reduction in staff. So I wanted to ask you, when we get to that next item, to formally, officially reduce our allocated staffing from 9 to 8, which allows me to go back to the county and have them reduce our projected personnel costs. That affects the allocated staffing, and the projections are number of people allocated affects the estimate for insurance costs. I mean, across the board, the health insurance, the retirement costs. So I think if we can do that, we will be able to maintain our personnel expenses, at least our salary expenses, fairly close to what it is this year. It does appear that every other line is going up, and I understand the county insurance expenses have gone up, and we will budget accordingly when they give us that projection. We had a difficulty this year when the county projected, when the county finished their budget. There was an increase in healthcare costs that had to be passed through. Basically, the healthcare cost per employee went up $3,000 per employee. And so that in this current budget added $24,000, which we'll have to finagle and figure out a way to cover this year. It does mean that there may be a deficit, which we can respond to in one of two ways. We could move money from another line and cover that. As I noted earlier, our cash reserve, our cash balance has increased annually, so that we do have a comfortable cash reserve that could absorb that deficit if that's the way we end up this year. My goal is to get the most precise numbers I can at the time that our budget needs to be adopted, so that I can bring you a budget next month that has numbers that we can live with. So there's some juggling to do to try to get that within a balanced, within the context of a balanced budget. So next month I'll come back with a proposed budget. Then subsequent to that, I go to the City Council and the Board of Supervisors to present that budget, to give all the rest of your board members a chance to comment on that, bring it back, and ideally, and under our JPA, get that adopted by our June board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there any commissioner comments?
Do we need some kind of, do we need an action on this?
No, there's no
nothing to
action
action.
required. I'm just trying to give you a heads up on where we're at with budget for next year, that this year's budget is strong in the context of an unanticipated expense, several of them, and we're just juggling to try to cover it all. We do have in this year's budget $100,000 plus budgeted for a depreciation expense, which I know is seen different ways from different people. In business, depreciation means something different from government. The county as an entity, I'm not sure about the city, but the county doesn't have to fund depreciation because we're a special district. We actually have to put a line in our budget for $100,000, and that's based on a depreciation schedule we get from the county. And it's money that's budgeted but not spent. It's not spent on an item this year, but it is budgeted, and that over time helps to increase the reserve fund that's available. So probably the worst case that would happen in this fiscal year is that $100,000 depreciation expense would result in a slightly less amount of money going into our cash reserve.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any public discussion? Okay, no comment. We'll go to 7.3. This is a discussion and possible action regarding the Memorandum of Understanding for services between the County of Del Norte and the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, and the MOU between the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority and Authority employees. Kevin?
This is partially in response to a discussion that happened last meeting and something I said earlier, which is I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been at every board meeting, every action that's happened. All the things we're doing, all the policies we have, the pay, the benefits, everything that we have right now has been in front of this board, but you weren't necessarily here. So you're not going to be aware of that unless I help inform you of that. Several years ago, our gate staff and our account clerk organized with SEIU to form a union. This board authorized me to negotiate the MOU. I put it in the agreement so you can see what it looks like. It's about 50 pages, lots of details. The reason that we wanted to have this is because we have a fairly short memorandum of understanding with the county that defines how the county can provide services for us. When the agency first started, it didn't make sense for us to hire our own payroll people and benefit people, and so we have a contract with the county to provide those services, and we take every step we can to mirror those benefits because we can't get services that are outside of what the county can provide. So when we negotiated the MOU with the lower level staff, the gate staff and the account clerk, we went to painstaking detail to make sure that that was consistent with the county policies. What I have been doing up to this point is assuming that those same policies, those same benefits also apply to the middle managers. When you have a union agreement that specifically excludes the middle managers, and that is Ted Ward and Isabel Valdez, they don't have an agreement similar to that. And because I've been basically applying these benefits across the board, all staff are treated the same way under the same terms. I thought it would, one, be useful for you to see both the agreement we have with the county that says we will follow the same policies as the county, but this board has ultimate discretion on what gets approved and what doesn't get approved. This agreement was approved, and I think we should go down a step just to clarify that these same benefits apply to the middle managers, and to the extent that we can try to correlate that to the benefits that I receive as well. So I think it's worth some extra steps to make sure that everybody has clear expectations as far as what benefits we get and what benefits we don't get.
And I know why this is brought up. I was requesting 2.2 from last meeting, and it was asking for a 20-year longevity raise. And department heads within the county, and by the way, the MOU with the SEIU doesn't apply to the director. Sorry, you're not covered under the MOU with that.
No, that's why we'll negotiate me separately.
Sure. But there's no such thing as a 20-year longevity raise within the county for department heads. It doesn't exist. And there is no 15-year longevity raise either. So I think it's misinforming to tell the board that we're looking for an approval of 5% longevity staff increase for the director in recognition of 20 years of service.
Well, that was last month.
Yeah, I know, but this is response, obviously, to...
Well, I think it is partially in response to the criticism of staff that we didn't take furlough days, and a clarification that when the county imposes furlough days on county staff, that doesn't automatically apply to our staff. When the county balances its budget, the county won't have furlough days. It's a budget response because our budget was balanced, and probably more importantly because we chose to permanently reduce our staffing, and we were able to balance our budget without furlough days.
Actually,
I think it's
we only balanced our budget last year. We ran, per our audits, we ran 3 or 4 years in net deficits. So I guess I don't necessarily agree with you on that.
Well, you can't disagree with the fact that we have an agreement between this group and the county, you have it in your agenda, that specifically says this board makes decisions on those kind of policies. This board, in the previous time you were on the board, during the 10-member board, at no point did this board impose or require furlough days. The board provides direction and we follow it. And last year and this year we will most likely have a balanced budget. Last year for definite we did, and the year before that is history. The MOU with the line level employees has been approved. The need to have a clarification for the middle managers is logical, so that if I'm applying that to them now, that makes sense. These are the terms that are in that. This is a starting point for providing clarification. I never said, to be clear, that the longevity increase was mandated. I always considered it to be discretionary.
But why was it on the agenda? There is
I
no,
asked for it.
But there's no 20-year longevity raise. It doesn't exist.
Okay, well, it doesn't clearly because
I mean, we haven't seen a contract either, so I can't point to a contract and say it's in the contract. It's not a policy of the Solid Waste Authority to have a 20-year longevity raise.
Well, that again, that was last month.
Yeah.
And it was denied. It's not the history that we're trying to rehash here. It is the need for clarification on what benefits do apply.
Oh, absolutely, but I
So I
also
think that's moving forward would be a good idea to make sure that everybody is
Absolutely,
clear.
but I also would request that it's actual factual when it is put on the agenda for a 20-year longevity raise, that it actually exists, and we're voting on some policy that actually exists instead of one that's taken out of the air.
Okay, well, you have thoroughly explained why you voted no, and I'm accepting that those are your reasons. That was last month, and that's not the action. There is, in fact, no specific action required on this, but I think it's important that you have a chance to read through the MOU that you do have with your employees, and these are the people, again, that keep the doors open every day, I mean literally every day, and they have a written agreement that clarifies what benefits they do get. They're not confused. I think it makes sense to make sure that the middle managers have some also level of certainty and clarity, and to the extent that any of these policies are applied to me, I think it would be beneficial to both parties to make sure that we have clarity on that.
Mr. Hall?
Just, I don't want to go backwards either, but I do have to ask you, have you received a longevity raise in the past?
Yes.
Okay, so past practice would indicate that that longevity raise may occur at 20 years. So you know, to say that we had no knowledge that that could happen, it's happened before in this.
Well,
in
not
this
on a
group.
20-year longevity raise. It doesn't exist.
You received a 15?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so 15s exist? It doesn't exist either.
Well, and let me point out that this board has discretion, as does the Board of Supervisors, to provide an increase of any kind at any time.
Yes.
It is completely up to your discretion to decide if that was right. I asked, maybe I asked in the wrong way.
Let me chime in, because I'm seeing this as we're going around chasing you. You could put what you want on there, Kevin. I have no problem with that, but I also have the right to say, I'm sorry, this doesn't fit, or that's all right. I don't have a problem with your asking for things, and then we say no. Or yes, as the case might be. I think that's a healthy discussion. We're not going anywhere rehashing, so
No,
we
and
voted on that.
I'm not here to complain about that. I didn't bring it up. What I'm here to talk about is helping you understand that there is a distinction between the actions of this board and the actions of the Board of Supervisors, that we do have a basis for evaluating what are the terms and conditions for employment for some of our employees, but not all of our employees. And I think that both for your benefit and for my benefit, the issues Mike raised, the issues that may come up in this process, I think it's helpful to make sure that, I mean, when you offer pay and benefits, it's an enticement for an employee to stay, to work, to be happy. We should just all be clear on what those conditions are so that we don't get to the end of employment and find out that there was a misunderstanding.
Thank you. So,
This is informational.
It's just informational.
Okay.
We'll move on to 7.4, and this is a discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of a labor negotiator to meet with the director regarding contract negotiations. And I asked about this, and that has to be one or two of us to do negotiations.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused. I haven't seen this, and obviously I've got reference for the county, and I guess we don't have a mayor policy, but I have not seen this with any department heads in terms of hiring a labor negotiator to negotiate the salary.
Not hiring a labor negotiator, no. You appoint 2 people to meet with me. I would just as soon meet with the 4 of you in closed session, but our attorney has informed us that that's not how it works for me. I think clearly there are some issues to talk about related to my employment and my relationship with this agency, and I'm just trying to follow the protocol that was prescribed for accomplishing that. So you can appoint 1 or 2 people to meet with me. I can't meet with you all as a group as much as I would love to, and then we can start coming to a closer understanding of what I might expect from this point forward, just to avoid confusion,
So
uncertainty.
this was a request by the board for a legal opinion on the labor negotiations?
This is a memo from me requesting that you appoint 1 or more.
No, but I mean the legal opinion. Where did that come from? Does that come from the board's attorney or your own attorney?
No, that came, I also questioned that. It came from Martha.
It did not come from my personal attorney.
No, it came from Martha. She said that we cannot meet, all of us cannot meet with the director. Go ahead, Martha, go ahead.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So there would be different options for talking about Kevin's contract or what benefits or whatever apply with to him. It could be done in open session where everybody's present. That's how you could all meet with him at one time. You cannot meet with him in closed session. Or you could appoint 1 or 2 members from the board to meet with him to discuss those things. But I think originally it was thought that you would be able to meet in closed session with Kevin one-on-one, and that's not allowed. So that's how this sort of appointing labor negotiators, it could be a committee, it could be whatever you want to call it. But if at any point that's going to move into closed session discussions, that would come under the conference with labor negotiators.
And then after that meeting with the 1 or 2 people, can that be brought to the full board in public, or is that in closed session?
That's your choice.
I would assume it would be a closed
Oh.
session.
Okay.
Yeah.
From my understanding.
Chair Nia?
Yes.
May I suggest, or if you need a motion, I'll make that. Would you please appoint 1 member of this board, 1 from the county and 1 from the city, to meet with Mr. Hendrick?
I was going to ask for volunteers.
Well, I'll be happy to meet with you, Kevin, with an appointee from the city, and hear what you have to say. I frankly don't want to bring in some disinterested third-party labor negotiator with some other agenda on his plate. That's only going to complicate matters. So I'd be interested to hear man-to-man with another city representative.
Yeah, there was no intention of bringing anybody else. It was going to be 1 or 2 of
Leave
us.
it as
Yeah,
discretion.
okay,
Okay.
so
Would you
that,
like-
I would volunteer.
Okay, and I'll also appoint member Holly from the city.
So
those
we'll
are
find
two-
a time where we can meet together and we can kind of have a mini agenda and discuss what your concerns are?
Great.
And then we'll report back in closed session. Is that what I'm hearing, Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
you can
that'd be
report back to the 4 of you in closed session.
Thank you, Mr.
after-
Hawley, and thank you, Mr. Gitland. 7.5 is the discussion we just talked about a few minutes ago, a possible action regarding the director's recommendation to permanently reduce the allocated staffing from 9 to 8. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second it, and just with the clarification, it is in fact 8 now as we speak.
It's an empty position.
Yeah,
It's an empty
It's been
position.
empty for-
Okay, so I second.
Okay. Mr. Ward, would you, did you have a comment?
Public comment.
Would you, okay, hold on a second. So he's, we'll take,
Public comment.
is there any public comment on this item? We're permanently reducing from 9 to 8 members, and that 1 has been vacant for, what, 1 or 2 years? At least a year.
I'm not sure how it got muddled. I mean, it was an office technician
Right.
that got laid off, one of the hardest things I've done in my 20 years here. And somehow that got redefined as a refuse site attendant, the office technician. So we used to have 5 full-time office employees. Now we're down to 4 full-time office employees.
Okay.
And I think it's worth noting that when that happened, the remaining 4 people took on 25% more work because we all had to pick up the slack on what happened. I think we've stabilized into a functional unit at this point. The numbers of employees to operate the gate, to provide the service to our customers, is what we have right now is adequate. If we have for people to be able to do that. And as people, we may have a medical situation where somebody's taking time off, we'll hire temporary employees, so this excludes that. But this is something that we can live with.
Mr. Ward?
Yes, just to clarify, allocated staffing, is that specifically gate staff?
I think this
It
is
just
office.
says allocated staffing.
I think it was,
My intention is that they have a vacant refuse site attendant position on their books that we should scratch out.
Right.
That's what they have
That's
right
me.
now. Ted, it's not you.
I-
Thanks.
I-
Good point.
It seemed worth clarifying what
Yes.
we're talking about.
Yes.
All right.
so go ahead.
So I have,
I told you to read the memo.
this is a vote to permanently reduce the allocated refuse site attendant staffing from 9
Yes.
to 8.
Yes.
On a motion by Commissioner Sullivan, seconded by Commissioner Gitlin.
Yes.
Polling the vote, Commissioner Hawley.
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin.
Yes.
Chair Ania.
Yes.
Thank you.
We move on to item 7.6, and this is a discussion and possible action regarding the possibility of hiring a consultant to complete an independent assessment of the performance of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority and complete an analysis of possible improvements or alternatives such as the city or county withdrawing from the JPA or privatization.
I recognize that both the city and the county have been looking at this issue and spending some time on it. It's been suggested to me outside of these meetings by involved parties that it might be a useful step to bring in an outside consultant that can look at all the issues that you may be struggling with to help conclude this evaluation that has been started. And so I thought I would bring it to this group first for discussion. I can point out that many of the questions that you have, probably Ted and I could answer, but if you're looking for an independent, neutral, outside party to evaluate, then this may be the step that you want to consider. I understand that the city and county have a joint meeting coming up in May, so I would suggest if you want to make a recommendation that you recommend this for consideration at that joint city-county meeting, and that at that meeting, or perhaps starting today, you can start identifying the questions or issues that still you want more clarification on. In fairness, it would seem right that the cost of that analysis be split 3 ways. So that's the recommendation that I have in front of you. And
Actually,
that,
yes. Sorry, go ahead.
that to the extent that you want us to help, Ted and I can help city and county staff either prepare the scope of work or the RFP, or to help identify contractors. But I would strongly recommend that if you want an independent analysis, that the city and county or joint city-county effort guide this through, so when you get to the end of it, you have some level of confidence in the results.
Yes, Mr.
Actually, my request for the agenda is not this. I mean, this encompasses a little bit, but I specifically wanted, and I'm requesting for the next agenda that staff prepare a request for proposal for privatization of solid waste with the possible sale of the transfer site included in that. Additionally, I'd like a request, and obviously I'd need the consensus of the board, but for legal to actually give us the process if the county, the city, or both mutually wanted to pull out of the Joint Powers Authority. What is the actual process? Because that is not very clear within the actual JPA, and that's what I would request, those 2 items. One to put on the next agenda, and this one to also get a report back to the board.
Mrs. Rice, did you want to comment?
I know Ted didn't tell you to slow down, but I'm going to ask you to repeat the first one.
Okay, so the first one is release a request for proposal for privatization of the solid waste management in Del Norte County, including sale of the transfer site, to any private company that wants to bid on it, including, Hambros or Recology. If they want to put a proposal in, it won't affect their existing contract. Second one would be...
Can I comment on that one first?
Yeah.
So you're asking to have that put on the agenda for board direction to prepare a request for proposals?
I'm asking for for the staff to prepare a request for proposal to release.
I'm not going to refuse that, but I have no idea what, without board direction and more details, I don't think that's possible.
Okay, so let's bring that back to, I'm fine with
We
it
can
coming
bring
on
it
the
up
May
to the agenda.
That's fine.
And you guys can talk about it and figure out if that's something this board should do versus the city or the county. And what your intentions are, without more direction, I don't think we can do
Okay.
that. And then the board needs to agree that that's something
Yeah.
that you want to do and put it out. And
Okay, so that would be your request for the next meeting, to list that on the agenda?
Okay.
Chair Nia,
Yes.
I have some misgivings about how 7.6 has appeared. No one disputes, says anything that you're not an excellent manager and doing a good job. Certainly not me. And
Well,
I
you
wanna
haven't.
commend
I
you. But
appreciate that.
Let me say this, please. I want to know only, I want to narrow this search, the effects of privatization. Simple. We don't have to go into the independent assessment of performance of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. That's a given. You're doing a good job. We know it. That's not the issue. It's only as it relates to privatization of the process. That's what I thought was going to be on here, so that we would have additional expertise on the effects of privatization. Anything else out here, I'd like to see eliminated. I think I'm leaning toward Commissioner Sullivan's original motion, which is to narrow this down and find out where we stand as a result of the effectuation of privatization on the Del Norte solid waste removal. So I think that's, I'm in concert with what you're saying, Commissioner Sullivan. 7.6 seems to be a whole hodgepodge of different things, and we're only asking for one.
Okay. The reason that it's worded like this is because I talked with our attorney, and did you want to talk about that?
The second question.
The second question about clarifying the MOU.
Well, I'm not entirely clear on what you're asking, an opinion on what the process would be for winding up the authority?
For one
If
of
it
the
was
entities
to-
pull out
Uh-huh.
unilaterally, and also a mutual dissolution of the authority, if both parties agreed on it.
And what the process is, or what the effect,
Know what the process is.
what the process is?
Yeah.
If one party agreed on it, right?
Unilaterally, but also mutually.
So just what the process is, not the...
Exactly.
Okay.
Because that's not real
I could
clear in
probably
the
do that.
JPA.
Not what the effect is on either entity.
Well, it would have to be. I mean, obviously, that would be part of the question is if one entity pulls out, what exactly happens?
Well, as far as the results, assets and liabilities, I don't think I can give you an opinion on that. The reason being that because my office does represent the city and the Solid Waste Board Authority, when there is a potential for a divergence of interest, I cannot, jump on. I can't render an opinion because they could be potentially conflicting depending on who I'm giving that opinion to. So as far as that goes, I can't do that. I'm not sure that you could go outside for an independent opinion, but it's going to come down to if there is a withdrawal, mutual or otherwise, it's going to be, the city attorneys are going to have their opinion on what happens, and county council is going to have her opinion on what happens. And that's going to be where the issue is. No matter who your authority attorney is, I'm not sure that their opinion would have sway either way. But if you like an independent legal opinion on that, I would suggest hiring conflict counsel for that.
Okay. I would like to do that.
Okay. So that's one of the reasons we put it on there for that,
Okay.
for that way to get around to do that, because she couldn't do that. So you would like
I'd like
to
a
have-
legal opinion, independent counsel of what the effect is on both entities. I mean, in those scenarios.
Okay. You want that on the agenda for next month?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, I'm not opposed to that. I think that's a good idea for all of us.
Let's find out what the
Because
process
there,
is.
and I will say that I'm one of those, or that approached Kevin during the hiatus of the solid waste management group here when we weren't meeting, and I was thinking, there seems to be a lot of concern, and some members of the authority had mentioned that they thought the time for the JPA had come and gone, and I was realizing the seriousness of the decision-making that's before us. And because of that, and because the interests of the county and the city may be a little bit different, I don't know how it will turn out. We really haven't discussed this at the city level at any length. But the thought was an outside consultant coming in with no interests of any kind to think maybe it's not just privatization. Maybe there's some other ways we can operate in order to lower rates or whatever. Maybe they'd have other options that none of us have thought of. And so, and that was my thought, is we can have someone come in that has some expertise, and maybe they'll end up with the idea that privatization is the way to go. And then, not that we're insulated, we're decision makers here, but at least we will be making decisions based upon an objective opinion from the outside. And so that was why I was kind of glad to see this on the agenda today, because some of us have thought about this for a while, and I'd still like to see a broader approach. But I mean, we can do privatization on the one hand and do something else later, I guess, but it seems like privatization would be one of the options that would be available for us to improve ourselves.
Yes.
We've all seemed to have forgotten that when one party opts out, there is no JPA. It ceases to exist. And then there's a 6-month period, a 180-day period, to figure out what you want to do. We haven't started the clock yet. So the 6-month period hasn't yet begun to have this very discussion that we're having right now. So I'm continue to be confounded by why there isn't a decision being made on this. I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times from every attorney I've spoken to. When one party opts out, there is no longer a JPA. We have a few attorneys in the room. Did I mishear anybody?
Well, there's nothing to preclude us being proactive without pulling out of the JPA.
I think I would like to know in advance what we go to, if that's the case. And I would like a legal opinion, independent counsel, to say what happens.
Maybe that's the place to start. No, I know you're going to have public comments.
Yes.
So we're being asked to put this on the agenda for next meeting, so you can give more direction on what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Did you have a comment?
And I do want to make it clear, because I'm sure Mr. Lonsdale is going to comment on this, it is the request for proposal would be not a lapse in service. So
Yep.
would not be a lapse in service. So any proposal we went to would not be a lapse. So. Is his mic on? Ted, is his mic on?
Phone is not on?
There you
Now
go.
it is? Okay. I had intended only to address the question of consultants. You know, my view, and I indicated this to several folks on the board, is that we already have too many consultants, and we're spending too much money on consultants. And it struck me that there's a lot of legal talent at our disposal right here, and it comes down, I think, to a legal question. So if we don't have enough talent in-house to answer these questions, then and only then would a consultant be necessary. But given the way that your board is split, I think you'll have just as hard a time in choosing a consultant who will give one side or the other the answer that they want as you've had trying to select a public member. And so I wonder where all of this will go. It seems to me that the JPA idea is a good idea where joint jurisdictions manage or receive services. And we have within this county several other JPAs, one of which I'm familiar with, and I think your board members are too, and that is the Local Transportation Commission. It's lean and mean. Even though its public member does receive a stipend, the other members don't. The staff is small, and the services that are necessary are contracted out. Perhaps, I guess you all believe that that's at a saving over having full-time staff. other than the one person who's the executive director. That potentially could be a model for reforming the JPA rather than coming in with a wrecking ball and doing away with it with all of the consequences that Commissioner Gitlin talked about. That it ceases to exist, that nobody's running the store, that there's a long period of uncertainty, and that I'm sitting at home wondering whether my trash is going to be picked up. So I would respectfully recommend that among the options that you have looked at, either by a consultant or by your in-house talent, there be a reform of the JPA to eliminate the problems that I think some board members see. But what I would not like to see as a consumer of the service is that this question gets settled on an ideological basis rather than on a practical basis. And when I hear the term privatization, I think ideology, not considered approaches to solving problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. So we have that for the for meeting in May. Let's go on to item number 7, and that's a discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of Resolution 2013-01, enacting the CPI increases as required in the contract with Hambro and Recology.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comments? Please pull the vote. Mr. Ward?
Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chair Nia?
Yes.
Thank you.
Under item 7.8, do we have a closed session today? We do? Okay. Then we will go into a closed session, and that concludes our general agenda. We'll be going into closed session. Thank you.